I'll take you through how you can pass your GCC Factories exam. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you that have subscribed, thank you and thumbs up to you. If you haven't, what are you waiting for? Press that subscribe button so you can stay in contact and in touch with some of the uploads that I share. So I'm passionate and share a lot around engineering, around career development, and around leadership. I'm a true believer in that all of us are here for a purpose, that there are different experiences and engagements that we have that build us up as individuals, but it's meaningless if we're not sharing any of that and if we're not imparting it on others. One of the most commonly asked questions is how to pass the Factories exam, that daunting practical exam that a lot of people walk out of sweating. I'll share with you guys some key strategies and some things to look out for that can help you get through that exam and actually pass. If you haven't checked out my previous video where I shared how to pass the theory exam, please do have a look at that first. This one will solely just speak around some strategies and things to look out for your Factories exam. Try and write your theory exam first, because actually in your practical exam, they do ask you some questions based on the ARSH Act. So it does help to have studied all of that, and it actually makes it a bit more efficient and strategic for you to write that first, so you've got the knowledge and the background already on the ARSH Act before you write your practical exam. One thing to note is that the practical exam or your Factories exam is broken up into two sections. So when you enter your exam room, obviously you'll read all your instructions carefully, and what you'll find is that there are two sections. So Section A and Section B. Section A. So one of the things that you need to remember about Section A is that all three questions are mandatory. So there are three questions that you'll find in Section A, and in Section B, they'll have about 4 to 5 questions that you'll answer. Overall, at the end of your exam, you should have up to 100 marks that you've accounted for. So the 3 questions in Section A are mandatory, and then you'll be able to select any 2 questions from Section B. First thing that you must do when you get your paper is read through all the questions, especially in Section B, so that you're familiar with what the different options are. That way you can choose the 2 that you're most comfortable with answering. And you don't have to start with Section A. If the questions in Section B are more comfortable for you to start with, then by all means, start with the questions that you're most comfortable with. But remember, even if you answer 3 questions out of Section B, whereas you're only required to answer 2, they will mark the first 2 that you've got obviously on your paper. So make sure that you're comfortable with all the questions, read through all of them, read them carefully, and select your best 5. So 3 are mandatory, and the 2 from Section B, choose the ones that you're most comfortable with. In Section A, so Section A has 3 questions, and generally this is how the exam is structured. The first question will be around a mechanical type problem. So mechanical question would usually be your first question. In this question, they ask you predominantly around steam generation, around thermodynamics. Sometimes they ask around heat transfer, but your core mechanical questions. So they do give a formula sheet, but it's very important that you yourself understand your first principles, because at the end of the day, that's what they're checking. They're checking that you understand first principles, and when faced with a practical application, you can solve that problem, obviously through logical approach, and get to your result or your root cause. So the first question is mechanical. First question is predominantly steam generation, but can be anything in thermodynamics, HVAC, refrigeration, heat transfer, but do focus a lot on your mechanical, especially your core mechanical subjects, especially for question 1. The second question is usually electrical engineering. They could ask you anything within the electrical scope. They predominantly ask around transformers, so it's important that throughout your studying you do cover transformers. Even if they don't, it's not at any loss in any way, but do think around the biggest issues and challenges that we've got in South Africa, whether it's be with tariffs and costings and whatnot. They will definitely try and touch around your transformers. There may be 1 or 2 questions around SANS codes, so do familiarize yourself with the SANS codes as well. And then in the optional section, in Section B, there they can ask you anything. They can ask you another question around transformers and fault currents. They can ask around induction motors. They can ask around synchronous machines, and any miscellaneous questions around electricity. So familiarize yourself also with the SANS codes and with wiring as well, because they will throw 1 or 2 questions on theory. But don't forget and don't fail to study on your transformers. Even if they don't have a question on transformers in your mandatory section, they're most likely to have something around power generation in your optional Section B section. So your third question is usually a law question. So this is a question where they will link it back to the OSH Act in one way or the other, and they will try and make it practical. So it could be something around based on the requirements in the OSH Act and what you've got in your factory, just 10 things around risk assessment and mitigations that you would put in place. So that's why it's important, or what I feel is key, that you write your theory exam first, because then you've got a full understanding and appreciation of the law and the OSH Act. And when they ask this question, it's almost a free 20 marks, because you could always go back and apply and think of practically how you would apply that law in your working environment. So the third question in your section A, your mandatory section, is usually around theory. It's usually around the OSH Act and how to obviously practically apply that back in your workplace. So section B usually has 5 questions. I've seen 1 or 2 papers that have 4. When I wrote my paper, they had 5, and some of the previous papers, when you look at the 2017, 2018 papers, they've got 5 questions that they ask you. So this is a combination. So it's a mixture of electrical and mechanical. Depending on where your strong suit is, you have the option of choosing the question that you're most comfortable with. So this ranges throughout the syllabus that's been offered. It's very important that when you do follow your curricula, that you focus on key subjects and topics and that you understand them in depth. That way you'll be able to navigate your way and think around any of the problems. So in quick summary, the factories exam is split up into 2 sections, section A and B. Section A is mandatory, and you usually have 3 questions, 1 mechanical, 1 electrical, and 1 that is based on law. Section B, you've got an option out of 5 to choose 2 questions. So all in all, you must answer 5 questions. What's important is that you start off by reading all the problems and all the questions so you see which one you're familiar with first. You don't necessarily have to start with the section A questions, but you must answer all of those. Start with the one you're most comfortable with and put your best foot forward for you to succeed. A key tip is that you start writing your law paper first, because ultimately it will help you also when you write your practicals paper, because there is a question based around law. Always link everything back to first principles, and remember, you're being tested and challenged in your practical application. So think back to, how does it work in the workplace? Does this make sense? And link that to the theory that you've studied or learned. Ultimately, it must make sense for you. So strategic topics for you to get through, definitely steam generation, power generation, compressors, heat transfer, study law, and then all the miscellaneous subjects that you can also fit in. Very important that you understand the operation of boilers, you understand HVAC systems, especially refrigeration, your thermodynamics and your compressors. Electrically, understand your different types of motors and how they operate, and also with power generation and transformers, you won't go wrong. Stay tuned for my next video where I'll share some strategies on how I studied to get through the factories exam. It's more and more unlikely that you have the same questions being repeated because of the freshness of the examiners committee and what they're trying to do, obviously, to getting us to be a bit more dynamic in our thinking. So do go through past papers just to refresh yourself in your memory around some of the application, the principles, your approach in solving problems. Also, remember to work in groups. The same high-level strategies that I followed for the law exam, do look at that video as well, because ultimately it's just around how it is that you apply yourself, the time that you put in, and how you link it back to what is happening practically in your factory. Remember to live your best life, learn as you grow, and lead for change. Sharp.